All right, guys, welcome back to the Transfer Portal YouTube channel presented by NoContextCFB. We are joined by a very special guest today, CBS Sports legend himself, Dan Campbell's Texas football legend himself, Shehan Jeyarajah. Man, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Hey, man, thank you for joining us. We are also joined by Jake, who is our Aggie rep for today. Jake, man, how you doing?
Pretty good, man.
And then we got, of course, Adam, our UT/UH rep. Man, how you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Ready to talk some Texas football.
I am happy that we're finally back to Texas football. I'm glad that we're finally getting back to the atmosphere. World is returning back to normalcy as far as I'm concerned. We're here to rank all 12, correct me if I'm wrong, 12, I think, because same using next year with 13, 12 Texas FBS schools. And we got in this tier already, we got it as college football playoff contenders / New Year's Six hopefuls, the conference champs hopefuls, bowl bound teams will barely miss bowling, forgetful, and that four-letter word at the very bottom. We're going to go into that a little bit later. Guys, we kind of know the drill at this point, man. Let's get right into it. Jake, your first school right out, Texas A&M. Let's start with you, man. If you, in your honest opinion, how do you feel it? Or did I just put you too much on the spot right now?
I mean, I figured we would save A&M and Texas for the end.
Let's do that then. Let's go to Shehan's alma mater right there, Baylor, just down there. I mean, I think that would be a good enough start right there. Shehan, how do you feel about your Bears this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that after last year, obviously they go 12-2. They make the Sugar Bowl and win, and they finish with 12 wins for the first time in program history. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited right now in Waco. Obviously, they were picked number 1 in the preseason Big 12 poll. They have a lot of production back, especially on the lines. I think that they're still going to be among the class of the Big 12. Some people have them as high as being in the college football playoff conversation, which I think that they could get on the edge of that. But really, I mean, they are still, in my opinion, the favorite to go to the Sugar Bowl. I think that they're still very much a New Year's Six caliber team. With some of these Power 5 schools, I think obviously we're going to be in a range where these top 2 tiers are kind of similar. But I think that when you look at the state of Texas right now, I mean, not only should Baylor be in the first tier, I mean, I think that at this moment, you could make the case that Baylor should probably be the number 1 team if you're talking about a power ranking or something like that. They're starting top 10 in the country. Obviously, Texas A&M is up there at number 6 as well. But I think that if you're ranking teams right now based off of what's happened and what people anticipate this year, they obviously belong in that first tier.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with you. For me, I think I picked Baylor to be in my Big 12 championship winner this year. I think Dave Aranda has got himself a really, really good set of players and coaching staff. I think even though they do lose quite a bit of talent, so much of the Big 12 has lost a lot of talent this season. I think they still bring in like just over 50% production, if I recall correctly. That's still a really good team. They were among the best rushing offenses in the Big 12 last year. I think that can go a long way for them this year. For me, they are another college football playoff hopeful. I don't think they'll quite make that, but I think they're going to go find themselves back into a New Year's Six bowl.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'll let you go, Adam.
I remember me and Jake, we did the Big 12 preview, and I had Baylor winning the Big 12 again. I think their defense is just too good. I think they easily have the best coach. It's definitely in Texas, probably in the Big 12 too. I really like Dave Aranda, like y'all said. I put him right at the top. Right.
Yeah, for me, Baylor, it all starts with the defense. I know that a lot of people are going to be talking about shaping and how the offense is going to be shaped now under year 3, I believe, under Dave Aranda, and the turnaround that he's really had with this program. A lot of momentum heading into this year, obviously off the back of the first 12-win season in program history. I'll agree with y'all, and Baylor takes its spot rightfully at the very top of our tier list.
All right, so we kind of already said that we're going to put A&M and that other Texas school, that UT in Austin. We're going to save those for the best for last. So let's go ahead. Let's go to that team that's currently 4th from the left at the top row. I'm going to go ahead and let y'all do this because y'all don't want to hear my thoughts.
I think we kind of do. I mean, unfortunately, Rice, they're just not that good. this year. I don't think they'll be that bad, but I mean, we named the category after them for a reason, right?
Yeah. Rice, like Adam said, there's a category named after him for a reason. Now, while the team is not as bad as they have been in years past, not a whole lot of reasons to attend a Rice game, as their crowds in a few weeks will show you.
And how much their stadium sucks too.
I will throw a defense for Rice. I think that their coaching staff is really good. Like, they really do a good job. I think that they have an identity that they're trying to build. They've actually, I think, really found their groove from a recruiting perspective as well. I hate to be the analyst who just says, well, if they had a quarterback, but like, that's been such a big issue for them. Wiley Green is back up. I mean, this is like his third stint starting for the team. None of them have been good to this point. And so I think that they just really don't have a dynamic presence on the offensive side of the ball. And you kind of need that. Defensively, they're coming along. I really like DJ Arkansas, who was a player for them at linebacker, who they recruited last year. I think he's going to have a chance to play a bigger role next year, but you're just looking for mismatches on offense and you can't find them. They haven't had the consistent line talent in order to kind of run that Stanford style system. They haven't had the running backs who are necessarily game changers consistently enough over the past couple of years. I really like Bradley Rosner at receiver, but I just don't love who's throwing him the ball and the pieces around him. So I don't think that they're this. I wouldn't put them in their own tier of bad in Texas. I think that there are definitely other teams that could fall into that, but obviously you guys created a category called Rice, so I assume that's where we're putting Rice.
Andrew, any closing thoughts before I put them where they belong?
Nah.
All righty, Rice goes square into our last category.
I'm looking forward to September 24th. That's for sure. All right, so obviously we're only sticking to FBS right now, so we can ignore the ACU, Lamar, SFA, Sam Houston. Shout out Sam Houston coming over in 2023. But let's go to SMU. I think SMU, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting teams in the state of Texas going into the season. There's really a lot for me to like about SMU. Tanner Mordecai was obviously the touchdown leader among all AAC quarterbacks last year. I think I'm not going to personally make this debate, but there are talks that he was the best quarterback in the state last year. I think that's debatable. That's just my personal opinion. But, guys like Reggie Roberson, gone, Danny Gray gone, Ulysses Bentley going over to Ole Miss. But they do bring in Kamar Wheaton, transfer from Alabama, former 5-star guy. Rashee Rice is supremely talented. Like I said, Tanner Mordecai is really good. This is a team that Rhett Lashley is very familiar with. The downfall for SMU for a really long time has always been their defense. And I think last year after they played U of H, it really played itself out towards the end, especially when they got to games like Cincinnati also. I think SMU could be a really good team this year, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think they have the same talent as Houston or even a Cincy, maybe not even a UCF. So I think they're going to go bowling. I think they'll go 7-5, 8-4. That's just my personal opinion.
So I'd agree. I don't think that they have Houston level talent. I think that Houston, we'll get to them in a second, but it's probably even in that top category. But I do think that they're right there with that next group of teams in the AAC. I think it's going to be a 4-team race for the American title race between Houston, who I expect to win relatively easily, to be honest. Cincinnati's reloading a lot on the defensive side of the ball. They lost really all of their biggest playmakers, obviously, to the NFL from what was really a culmination team for them. I'm probably a little lower on UCF than most. I didn't really see it last year the same way that some other people seem to, and I think that SMU absolutely can compete with and beat UCF and kind of get into that conversation. So I view them as a team. You mentioned obviously what they have on offense. I view them as a team that definitely could force their way to the conference championship game and be in that second tier. I think that you look at what they have at quarterback. I mean, I think that Tanner Mordecai, like you mentioned, is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in Texas. Their receiver room is insane. Rashee Rice is really the guy to know in that room, but they have guys coming in and out of the program who are going to be big time players for them. At running back, you mentioned bringing in Kamar Wheaton, who's going to be sort of a game changer for them. Trey Siggers is back after obviously doing a great job in North Texas the last couple of years. And then also they're poised to get TJ McDaniel back as well, who is somebody who kind of is a forgotten name because he suffered an injury and missed most of the last 2 years, but he was a really good player for them when he was healthy. So the big question, I think, is going to be on the offensive line. They lost Alon Ali to TCU as well as a transfer, but defensively, they just have to do enough. I think that you can be a single side oriented team and get into that conference title discussion. You probably can't win the thing, especially over a team like Houston. But for me, they're definitely a tier 2 team. I think they really have a lot of upside.
See, I mean, I want to agree with you. I agree with everything that you said, but my problem is that they have to face Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. I think that's really tough. And then to go to UCF and they have Memphis too. I think that's just too much for they have a new head coach. They do have a lot of turnover. But I agree, Tanner Mordecai, Rice, great. I just think them having to face UCF, Houston, Cincy, and Memphis, it's tough for me to put them in that second tier just based off their schedule.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I do think that SMU does go bowling this year. I don't think it's gonna be as successful of a season as they had in recent years. And they have the potential to really go up this tier list as time goes on because 3 of us here are from the Dallas area. You see the billboards up all over. They're really hitting the recruiting really hard in DFW and just trying to get as many guys into the city as they can, especially guys that are local to Dallas. But on the offensive side of the ball, there's really nobody better in the AAC maybe than Tanner Mordecai. So I do think that they do have the potential though to go bowling. So I'm gonna say that they should go into the bowl bound tier.
I personally would agree with that. I think that's fair. They would really have to, I think, in order for them to overcome a team like Houston, UCF, and Cincy, they would just need like all gears running all perfectly. Am I saying it's impossible? Absolutely not. But I think if you told them like, hey, an 8-4 season, bowl bound, maybe something similar to last year, may not be as exciting as you would hope, but I would still take it. But it's interesting what you're saying about SMU being on billboards all over Dallas. As I said, like off camera, when I was driving back from San Marcos this past weekend, I was in Katy, driving back to my Houston. I actually saw an SMU billboard in Katy, and I'm just like, of all places to see SMU billboard, why Katy? Like, why West Houston? But they're trying to market, and I give props to their marketing team because I think SMU has always had this image of being a rich, privileged school where dad's lawyer, all that. Dad's probably CEO, to be honest with that school.
Well, rightfully so.
So yeah, and actually no, I drove down to San Antonio a few weeks ago as well. I actually saw a billboard out of Dallas as I was leaving. I saw a billboard heading into Waco, and then I also saw another billboard heading into Austin. So they are definitely trying to make their brand more accessible outside of just kind of this insulated world that it's been in for a while. Obviously, we saw that start under Sonny Dykes with sort of reaching out more in the Metroplex, but credit to them. I think they want to be more of a statewide brand from an athletic perspective. And I think we've already seen results.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all of us except for Shehan seem to be in agreement that SMU will go into the bowl bound category. And I think that how we should do this is, majority is where we'll put the team. And if we have a disagreement that's split, we can debate that a little bit further.
Sounds fair.
All right, cool. Jake, let's go to another Dallas team. How are your thoughts on TCU this season?
Yeah, so TCU, obviously a bit of a mixed bag for them. I do really like the hire of Sonny Dykes and getting him away from that SMU program, crossing I-30 to go over to Fort Worth. That was a huge hire, I think, for TCU. And Sonny Dykes has always been a coach who his players have absolutely rallied around. And I think that bringing him into a program like TCU that has had so much success over the past decade that has fallen short a little bit over the past few years, with the exception of some notable wins over teams like Texas. Sorry, Adam. But I think that there's a lot of potential there. I am high on Max Duggan. And I do think that they do have the potential to be on the upper half of the Big 12, but with other teams at the top like Baylor, OU, and Texas seeing huge improvements, I don't see TCU really going beyond that bowl bound category, and it'll be close if so. So for me, they go into the third tier.
Yeah, I mean, I really kind of view TCU as a little bit of a chaos team this year. I think that they do get back to a bowl game, but there's a lot of pieces to kind of work out right now. I will say, I do think Chandler Morris will end up starting at quarterback for them instead of Max Duggan, even though Duggan's obviously been the incumbent for so many years. I think that he just fits in a little better with what Sonny Dykes and his staff and Garrett Riley, their offensive coordinator, maybe wants to do. But I don't think they feel great about either of those guys either. I don't think that they feel like they have their answer at the position, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them take a transfer after the season. I've talked with some of my TCU friends, and Hudson Card, who knows? But I think that there's going to be a chance that they really have some upside on the offensive side of the ball that they haven't showed before. I mean, you look at their receiver room, I think that they're a lot deeper than they've been in recent years. Quentin Johnston is like a 1A type guy. He's he's going to have a chance to go in the first round of the NFL draft next year if things go right. They feel pretty good about what they have at running back. They brought in Louisiana transfer Imani Bailey to kind of help replace Zach Evans in some ways. So I think that they feel like they're going to be able to grow on offense, and defensively it's going to be a little bit more of a process, I think. But I'm optimistic about what they're able to do. They brought in Joe Gillespie, who was the defensive coordinator at Tulsa, who really, you guys remember Zaven Collins, obviously that's his defense. He's really developed defensive backs at a high level, these long athletic type guys. So I'm really optimistic about what they're going to be long term, and I think that maybe by the end of the year we start to see it. But it's funny, I remember back in Sonny Dykes' first season at SMU back in 2018, he kind of came in and they were good at times and bad at times, and they kind of had a chance to be playing for the AAC championship at one point, but ultimately finished 5-7. And I think that's probably about what it's going to be this year, except probably with more like a 7-5. Like they're going to have a chance to win some games and show some signs, but we won't really get to see the whole thing come together until maybe next year.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up Imani Bailey, the transfer from Louisiana. I'm sorry, I'm still going to call him Lafayette. I don't care. But sorry, Louisiana people. I was actually at the New Orleans Bowl this past season. That was in New Orleans, of all places. And Imani Bailey won. Yeah, exactly. It was and I believe he won the game MVP. I remember he got some really good runs in against Marshall, him and Rasheen Ali. Prayers out for Rasheen Ali, actually. But I was really impressed by Imani Bailey. I don't think he's going to be Zach Evans, but I think he's going to be very, very good for that team. Quinton Johnson, as you already said, he's a really good receiver. I think he's easily a top 10 receiver in the country for me. It's kind of a little bit what you said about Rice, except a little bit, a lot better team overall. I'm just not a fan of the quarterback room for TCU. I've watched Max Duggan last year, and there were times where I'm like, what am I supposed to be watching here? I think they're going to be bowl bound. I don't think they're quite there in terms of conference championship hopeful yet, but we'll see flashes. I think a 7-5, 8-4 is a very respectable record for them.
I mean, yeah, they go 8-4. I mean, I call that a win all across the board. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not. I kind of agree with what y'all said. I don't think that they're quite there yet. I am interested to see them go at SMU at the end of September. I think that game's going to be fireworks. It's going to be a lot of mad fans in that stadium if they figure out how to fix their field first. But yeah, I got them winning 6 games, so I guess they make the bowl. But I'm not confident about it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, so guys, I believe we've come to a consensus on TCU going into that third tier.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, awesome. And next we will be moving on to the Texas Tech Red Raiders with new head coach Joey McGuire. Andrew, you want to start us off?
I'm kind of disappointed from Tech's perspective that Tyler Show got named the starter. I was really hoping it would be Donovan Smith. I think Donovan Smith is I think he's a much more dynamic quarterback for Tech if he was to get it. I thought he played really well last year whenever he got in. I don't know. I'm really stuck here, to be honest with you. Tech is just always one of those teams where I'm just like, they can always like put up like offensive fireworks if they really wanted to, especially if a game is in Lubbock. But I like Joey McGuire. I like his offense a lot, from what we saw at Western Kentucky. Zach Kitley, not Joey McGuire, but was Zach Kitley going from Western Kentucky to the offensive coordinator for Tech. I think they could really do some damage on the offensive side of the ball, but Tech, it's always about their defense. Their defense is always Swiss cheese. Okay. I'm pretty sure my high school defense could have put up better defense what they could. I see. Here's the thing. I guess I'd put them at the bowl bound. I just think they got to break eventually.
What?
But
Yeah.
6-6.
That's
6-6.
wild.
I'll happily jump in here. They're not making a bowl.
That's
no way
wild,
they're making a
Andrew.
bowl. And the reason that they're not making a bowl isn't because that they're not good, because they went bowling last year. They won a bowl, and I think they might be better than last year, or at least they might at some point in the season be better than last year. But their schedule sucks, man. They play Houston and NC State in the non-conference slate. They play a lot of the best teams in the conference at home, games that they're probably going to lose. They play all of their winnable games on the road. It's just the worst way to set up a schedule for a first-year head coach. You mentioned Donovan Smith, obviously, at quarterback. I like him a lot, too. I think by the end of the year, he's starting. But Texas Tech is going to start 1-5. They just are. And it's going to suck, and it's going to be unfortunate, and it's not going to be reflective of team quality, because I think that this is a team that has a lot of excitement. I mentioned TCU as a potential team that could be a chaos team. This is the chaos team in Texas. They're going to ruin somebody's season. They get all of Baylor, Oklahoma, and Texas at home. They're going to win one of those games. I'm not sure which one it is as yet, but they're going to win one of those 3 games and really give themselves some juice heading into next season. But the record's not going to be there. They're going to do a lot of nice things. I think that for me, it's funny. Record-wise, they're probably going to be in what would be considered forgetful, but I think that in terms of what they're actually going to be, they're going to be must-watch television. I think I'm going to put them in the miss bowling category, because I think that they're a team who's going to show a lot of upside, and you really should pay attention to. It's just not going to show in the win column this year.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree with that. I just think that this is a more talented team, but now that you brought up the schedule, you know what? It's true. Okay, it is true. But I do think that this is a team that I think will be a lot better, I would say, come 2023 to 2025.
Yeah, and the one thing that I'll mention, too, is that they were one of the best recipients of the coaching carousel, because obviously they had Joey McGuire, who was great. Obviously they had Zach Kitley, because Sonny Cumbie left to become head coach at Louisiana Tech. And I think that that's probably an upgrade in terms of what they want to do there. And then also, by the way, they get Tim DeRuyter at defensive coordinator, because Mario Cristobal does not take him to Miami when he leaves Oregon. So those are, I think, a collection of tremendous coaches. They got some great assistants too. Zarnell Fitch is a defensive line coach who came from Gary Patterson's staff and has done a tremendous job over the past couple of years. Like, I love their staff personally, but again, it's not going to happen in year one. This is really when we see the recruiting come together, when we see the development come together, which I expect. I think it's going to be a much more sort of cohesive type of team. Joey McGuire, he obviously comes from Baylor under Dave Aranda, but really he is a Matt Rule guy. He wants to be a CEO, a general manager of a team, a sit here, put the pieces together, make everything work together, create a roster and a culture that makes a lot of sense. And I think that when you start getting to year 2 and year 3, you're going to start to see that some of that come together. But in some ways, and it's not going to be this bad record-wise, in some ways, this is going to be the 1-11 Matt Rule year, where he just kind of starts over and makes things happen.
Yeah,
I agree. Go ahead, Jake.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just going off of what Shehan just said, the best way to describe Texas Tech right now is a project. And when you revamp an entire staff like this, like they have done, regardless of the talent that you have on your roster, there's going to be scheme adjustments. And then when you get a schedule thrown at you like this, I mean, Houston is going to humble the hell out of Texas Tech. That's just the reality. In North Carolina State, they're a quality ACC team. So you can't expect Texas Tech, especially with all the talent that the Big 12 does have at the top end, especially. This is a team that could easily lose 8 games this year, but they shouldn't have their heads down about that. Like you said, for me, I'm really disappointed with the decision to not start Donovan Smith. I thought that when he played against Mississippi State in the bowl game last year, that he showed some really good flashes, and that in his limited opportunities, he made the most out of his snaps. But obviously the coaching staff with the addition of Kitley coming over from Western Kentucky, that's a big deal. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and I'm not saying that Texas Tech is going to be that big of a program, but for now they're going to be stuck. For me, I'm going to say that this is going to be a forgetful year. It's going to be a developmental year, but I think it's going to be very forgetful.
And Jake went on the record, he doesn't think that Texas Tech at the end of it will be the Roman Empire, so it's good to have that.
Yeah, I have to say that because some Red Raider fans will take that quote and fire it off.
I'd rather live in Rome than Lubbock, that's for sure.
So,
all right,
where do y'all have them? I have them at forgetful for this season. I agree with everything y'all said.
Y'all go for it. I truthfully ain't gonna argue it.
I feel like winning 3 or 4 games is like forgetful.
I think that the reason that I won't put them in that category is just because I think that they are a team that you should pay attention to. They are a team that I think is doing stuff that matters. And so, for me, the forgettable category is for, man, they're just kind of running themselves into the ground, right? Like, we'll obviously, I think, get to a team down in San Marcos that maybe will be in that category, right? Where you're just kind of like, I don't even know what they're trying to do here. I think that for me, barely miss bowling, although it won't probably be a barely miss. I think that that's more representative of what Texas Tech is right now.
That's fair. The only reason I say forgetful is because I don't think that Tech fans are going to want to look back at this season aside from bits and pieces of looking at how players develop. So for me, I think that Tech fans after the season's over are just going to want to forget it and move on to 2023, because in my opinion that's kind of the vision that I think that Joey McGuire might even be going into it with. Just get players developed and move on to next year when you have older guys as opposed to all the youth that Tech does have right now.
I will say I did, this was like back in March probably, I did do sort of a pick of every game in the Big 12 schedule this year. And when I came to Tech, I picked them to beat Oklahoma in the final week of the season on Black Friday. And if they leave the season, if that's their last game of the season and they pull that kind of upsets, like, they're going to be talking about it all off season, right? I think that's what kind of season it's going to be. It's going to be a lot of it was bad, but did you see some of it? Did you see some of the stuff that happened? So I think that it'll be very much a momentum building season for them. So, I don't have any issue with them being in the forgettable category, but that's why I would have them higher than that.
Yeah, that's fair. Adam, do you have anything final to say before we kind of put it? Because for me, I'm going to stick with forgetful as my personal pick.
I mean, you persuaded me. I think I like Donovan Smith. I agree. I think he's going to end up starting after they lose 5 straight. And then Miles Price, I like him a lot too at wide receiver. I'm fine with moving them up one.
All right.
I like where they're going.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, if there was a tier between that, they would fit perfect. So, just for everybody out there in Lubbock, congrats. We moved you up to barely missing a full game. All right. And the next team up, as you can see here from the non-FCS schools, is going to be that school that Shehan referred to down in San Marcos, Texas State University Bobcats.
Man, I've seen some stats over this offseason that really contextualize just how bad things have been. Like, that Texas State's not been very good, but they're like down there in terms of like Kansas and even UConn and like that sort of level over the past 10 years. It's been bad. They haven't won more than 3 games. I believe they won. Did they win? I think 4 last year, but before that, yeah. So I guess they're heading in the right direction. But I think that before that they hadn't won 3 games since their second year in FBS when they were playing with a senior heavy roster under Dennis Franchione, because obviously they were allowed to do that as they transitioned up to the FBS level. So it's been bad. They haven't even been close to bowl games. They haven't really been all that competitive. They have a quarterback coming in. I believe it's Lane Hatcher. I believe that's because one of them is at Utah State, one of them's at Texas State. I can't remember which one is which, but one of the Arkansas State quarterbacks who Blake Anderson really brought in and did some good things with at Arkansas State is now at Texas State. I think that he's an upgrade over what they had before over there, but it's just they have so many holes on their roster. They've tried to fill them with transfers and it hasn't really worked. They haven't developed well. One argument that Jake Spavital made to me when all these transfers happened the first time around was, we are such a young team, like 65-70% of our roster is freshmen or sophomores. We wanted to get older, and that's why we took so many transfers, but the young kids haven't showed up at all. We're not seeing any of them develop. We're not seeing any of them turn into contributors for Texas State. So for me, I mean, this is the definition of a team right now that's forgettable, unfortunately. And it's a shame, but I think that when Jake Spavital took this job, he thought that this is a roster that's ready. They just need coaching that's going to get them there. And clearly that has not been the case. And, I'm more interested, honestly, at this point to learn. They just had a change at university president. They had a change at athletic director for the first time in a long time. How much does that help influence the future of Texas State football? Because I don't think the present's all that good.
Yeah. In full respect to Jake Spavital, fellow Aggie, your team sucks. It's going to be a bad year. The fans won't show up. There's, a lot more parties to go to that are a lot more entertaining at San Marcos than watching this team play. Forgetful for all the reasons that Shehan just said. There's really no cohesiveness in the offense, defense, special teams. They don't have it. It's going to be a forgetful year. This might be Jake Spavital's last season there too.
It sounds like y'all want to put them in the Rice category. Oh my gosh.
I feel bad for Rice at this point now. We should have done Rice.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like Texas State and Rice are in a similar category, but you guys created a category just for Rice.
I feel like, at this point, Rice Cats. I like that Rice Cats. Let's do it. Let's put it right there. Let's put them in the same category as Rice. I mean, wholeheartedly, if you asked a random college football fan to name all 12 schools, all FBS schools in the state of Texas, I guarantee you that Texas State would probably be among the most forgettable. It's so weird because Texas State is honestly such a, you just named a state and you added state at the end. It should be among the easiest ones. But, I'm sure if you even asked a normal, real casual, did they play in the Sun Belt? Did they play in Conference USA? Probably half of them would still say Conference USA. They're that forgettable. I don't think that's a team that's ever going to be a real threat in the state, to be honest with you. We should have Houston should have came in. We should have given the FCS Texas State. That's what we should have done.
Well, I will say too, right? Like with Texas State, I mean, they are so close to UTSA physically, right? Like San Antonio and San Marcos are like 45 minutes away from each other, basically. And so when you have UTSA rolling, when you have UTSA, by the way, with a former Texas high school coach who everybody loves at the moment, when everybody thinks that Texas State won't recruit high school players, that's a death sentence. I mean, it's just frankly a death sentence. They really have no choice, I think, except to go and probably hire somebody else who's also coached Texas high school football to try to kind of deal with some of these issues, because right now, reputationally, I think they're in a really bad spot. They're at risk of being forgotten, and they're in the middle of such a fertile recruiting ground, but they haven't done what they need to do. And some of it is Jake Spavital's fault. I mean, a lot of it is Texas State's fault. There were some quotes that came out of Sunbelt Media Day where Jake Spavital talked about how sometimes, every so often, he'll bring his team to go work out at San Marcos High School's practice facility because they're excited, because there are more Olympic weightlifting areas there than there are at Texas State. That's not acceptable for a team that wants to play in FBS. And if you don't want to play in FBS, that's fine. But there are things that it takes to play in FBS. And when you're comparing that to the new race facility at UTSA, for example, when you compare it to North Texas's facilities, like these are schools that you should be able to compete with and beat out in terms of facilities. And when we talk about facilities a lot at the Power 5 level, and it means one thing, but at the Group of 5 level, a lot of the time, it literally means, do you have enough stuff that people can work out when they need to? And Texas State at this point doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
I got lots of Texas State takes, man. Don't worry.
You sound like Andrew when he talks about Rice.
Hey man, chill. We don't need to talk about that. All right, we already placed him at their level. I don't need to bring him up.
The defense for Rice is that their grads just don't care about football. Texas State,
that's true,
would like to care about football. Rice is set up not to care that much about football with the way that their school is organized right now. Texas State just sucks. That's all there is to it. They don't do the things that they need to do to actually be taken seriously as a football program.
Yeah, and this next school I think is going to bring a lot of excitement from two individuals in here specifically. The University of Houston.
You see it.
So I'll let our two Coug fans in here take it away. Andrew, I'm sure that you've been waiting all video to talk about this. What are your thoughts on where we should put the University of Houston Cougars?
New Year's 6 hopefuls. Okay, so to go ahead and just be straight up analytical about this, I'll go ahead and I'll pretend to stop being biased now. Me and Adam, we've obviously spoken to quite a few UH guys already. Those guys, I really like the confidence that they have around the team around them, and Derek Parris and D'Anthony Jones, shout out to y'all. And this is just a team that I truly think is in its best situation in a really, really long time. I'm thinking right now it's in just as good of a situation as it was in 2015, prior to the Peach Bowl. I mean, I have more excitement going this season than I did for that Peach Bowl season. I think in terms of actual roster makeup and high point of the season, even though this is before my time, it's like I don't really see as much hype, in the last 10 years, 15 years of living in the city. Probably, I think there's more hype for UH football in the city now than there probably has been since David Klingler was quarterback here. I'm going even behind the Case Keenum years. This is a roster that I think is set up from top to bottom. The secondary is really the only concern that I have with the Cougs this season. I mean, when you lose guys like Demarion Williams and Marcus Jones, it does create a couple gaping holes in the secondary, but their schedule sets them up really, really nicely to the point where they don't really face that many pass-heavy offensive attacks. We obviously could go into sack to the point. Maybe corners don't even need to be that good. If they're the front seven guys can get to the quarterback real quick, corners probably only got to run about 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, to be honest with you. But in all seriousness, though, for me personally, I would take Clayton Tune over Tanner Mordecai. I just think he's more efficient. The way that he closed out the end of 2021 was probably better in my opinion. The team rallies around him. Tank Dell, for me, best receiver outside the Power 5. There's just a lot to like about Houston. Everything's clicking with this team. Everything was clicking towards the end, and I have zero reason to believe why it won't this year. Losing Ultimate Casco was a big loss, but you do bring in Brandon Campbell from USC, Katie Guy, and Tayshawn Henry, who's really good outside the tackles. And Houston does. I'm going to go ahead and just be honest with you. Their schedule this year is a bit of a joke. I mean, you do open up at UTSA, which would probably be their best team, to be honest with you, up until you play SMU in November. But to get UTSA, Rice, Tech, Rice, no, Tech, Kansas, Rice, whatever. But essentially you get UTSA, Tech, Kansas, and Rice in your first 4 games. Then you play an AAC schedule that doesn't even have UCF or Cincinnati. I think they're going to go 11-1. I don't know where that one loss is going to come from, but they have the roster built up to be 12-0. I think that this could be just an all guns fire blazing team for Houston.
So are you feeling like a sort of like Cincinnati last year type of season?
No, because we didn't. Sorry, can't say we, but I just don't think Houston has the schedule that Cincinnati did last year. I mean, while Indiana obviously was not a force to be reckoned with last year, they were still ranked going into that Cincinnati game. Houston's Power 5 opponents are Tech and Kansas. Though, while they will be future Big 12 opponents in Houston's conference, they get ready to take on the Big 12. It's obviously still not enough to get playoff hype. I think they'll still go 11-1. I don't know where that one loss is going to come from, but I think it is going to happen at some point. But I think they're going to find themselves in the Comp Bowl at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Houston to me is an obvious New Year's 6 hopeful. I think that they're pretty far and away the best team in the group of 5 this upcoming year. I love their receiver room. Obviously, Nathaniel Tank Dell, who you mentioned. Matthew Golden is a name that I keep hearing. He was committed to TCU for a long time, flipped at the last second, and I've heard that he's just been a star at camp so far. So I think that they feel pretty comfortable that they're going to have those pieces there. I probably lean Tanner Mordecai over Clayton Tune, but also I probably am holding a little bit too much of Clayton Tune's early career against him, if I'm being honest. I watched a lot of it. And so, obviously he's developed so much as a quarterback. He's pretty mobile. I think he makes good decisions. Obviously he fits very well within that system and knows it at such a high level after so many years in the system. You mentioned it. I would have loved to see them with Alton McCaskill in there. They're still going to have a chance to be really good. It's just going to be a little bit more of a rotation than maybe having a workhorse running back. And defensively, I'm not that concerned. They've developed in the defensive back room at such a high level over the past 4 or 5 years, and their front 7 is going to be so good with Derek Parrish. Chidozie Nwanku is a player who I really like. On the back end, Javarius Owens is somebody who has a lot of experience for them. So, to be honest, this team should go 12-0. There's no reason that they shouldn't go 12-0. I think that they're better than everybody on their schedule by a pretty good margin, not just by a little bit. I think that when you look at Cincinnati losing a decent amount, when you look at UCF, who I think is probably still. I have UCF personally behind SMU in my preseason rankings, which we actually have up right now on CBSSports.com. I think that SMU game is kind of a 1-game playoff for them, but like you said, last year Cincinnati got to play number 5 Notre Dame in their 1-game playoff, not unranked probably SMU, who's going to be really good, but not like that, right? So that is probably going to keep them from being in the playoff. I think that they have a great chance of going 13-0 and getting left out, and you'll feel bad about it, but also they're going to enter the Big 12 next year, and that won't be an issue heading forward. So I think a lot of reasons to be excited about this team. And no, I will push back a little bit. Man, the hype in the city of Houston after Tom Herman won them that Peach Bowl was off the charts. He was walking around town in a freaking grill, but at the same time, there is a lot of hype around this program right now, a lot of excitement about this team. And I think that if they're able to, and actually to kind of go a little off schedule for a second, if they are able to do this, if they're able to go, they finished top 10 in the country heading into the bowl game and in the playoff rankings, if they're able to go and compete in a major bowl game right as they're entering the Big 12, that changes everything for this program. They're going to be seen as a national caliber program heading into the Power 5. It changes everything in recruiting. It changes everything in development. I think that it would just be such a huge thing for this team to be able to be on that national stage. Because the other thing that you would have to mention too, right, at that point is, man, you'd have Cincinnati coming in, who was in the playoff. You'd have Houston coming in, who obviously we're talking about being in a New Year's Six game and maybe finishing 23-1 in back-to-back seasons, which would be unbelievable. And then certainly UCF was there in 2017, and BYU's been there in recent years. So I think that if Houston's able to have that kind of year, it fundamentally transforms the way that people look at this program and makes them, I think, a long-term contender in the Big 12 as well.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head for me. I was going to say that sometimes the stars, they align. The schedule is very easy. They shouldn't lose. If you're able to build that momentum going into the Big 12, recruiting, but the basketball team is playing well. That helps, obviously. They just built a new football facility, I think, or they're going to, or something like that.
They're going to.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is a very important season, I think, for Houston, because you can't lay eggs. It's just everything's lined up. We haven't even talked about Tank Dell, who might be the best wide receiver in the state. I think they're easily. I don't think they're gonna make the CFB playoff, just because, like we all talked about, the schedule just not good enough. But easily New Year's Six hopefuls.
Yeah, I should. And one small caveat that I would only say is, how do I say it? the fact that they have to go to both Memphis and SMU on the road does cause concern for me. Maybe Memphis not as much. I'm not as high as Memphis as I used to be, but in terms of the SMU,
Memphis is on fraud watch. If
Yeah.
we're being perfectly honest,
Yes.
they are kind of collapsing right now.
But in terms of SMU, that's a venue that U of H has struggled at for the last couple of years. Last couple of times that they played there, and it's I think at the end of the day, I'm a little bit more hopeful this year that they can win at SMU, but it's just always been a death trap for U of H in recent seasons whenever they had to go up there. Yeah, but I think they're going to overcome that obstacle this year. But yeah, if they win 12-0, 13-0, I think U of H's dream scenario going this season is go 12-0, host the AAC title game, see if you can get revenge on Cincy for last year, or if you're really lucky enough, get SMU back in your background. I think this is just complete revenge tour for Houston.
I will say one other thing. Obviously we got 2 Houston guys in the program. I'm sure there's more Houston people listening. Y'all have to show up to the games. Like
absolutely,
you just have to show up to the games. I mean, I was
SMU wasn't even sold out last season, and
right.
that like pissed me so much.
I always take these things with a grain of salt, but at the same time, it's a little instructive. I saw like a brand measurement type metric that ranked every program that's going to be in the new Power 5 with these 4 teams moving over, and it rated Houston as having the smallest and least active fan base of all 68 teams. That's how bad it's been.
That's
right?
true. It really is true. But
Houston obviously, Houston obviously historically, is a little bit more of a commuter school, and it's hard to build those kinds of cultures at that kind of place. But like, you're the University of Houston. You have, you're succeeding at the level that you're succeeding at. It has to happen, right? I mean, they have to go into the Big 12 with the city behind them in some way or another, right? I mean, we're seeing SMU do it right now at a higher level right now than Houston's doing it right now in the city of Houston. And Houston is Houston, and they've done everything that they've done over the past couple of years. I think that we really need to see it this year. We need to see. Now, I'm not saying they have to sell out every single game, but like, they got to sell some games, man. They got to show something on TV. Because last year, when game day went to Cincinnati, for example, I mean, that was huge, right? We got to see all the fans out there. We got to see the stadium packed. People paid attention. And I think that changes the way people think about Cincinnati. We have to see the same thing happen at UH.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jake, I think you go ahead and just put that tag on the New Year's 6 hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much for me to say. Y'all, stole the show with that. And I don't follow Houston as closely as obviously y'all do. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be excited. I love all the interviews that we do. By the way, if you have not heard our SAC Av interviews with guys like Derek Parrish, please do go ahead and listen to that. Very nice guy, and wish the best for them this year. But yeah, U of H. New Year's 6 hopeful. Wouldn't quite pencil them in as a CFP contender. So they're on the latter half of that, I think. But yeah, definitely a lot of reasons to be excited in Houston. And next up is my mother's alma mater of North Texas, the Mean Green. And I'll start with this one. This team's forgetful. I don't think that there's really a lot of reasons to be excited around North Texas football. They have a good year, once every decade, but this isn't going to be the year with the pieces that they have together. I don't know if y'all can provide any more insight as to that, but yeah, for me, forgetful.
What is interesting is that they actually did finish last year really strong. They won, I believe, 5 games in a row to close the year out. They really seemed to find something there. I was hoping that Grant Gunnell, the transfer from Arizona, could come in and win that starting quarterback job, but it sounds like it's going to be Austin Aune, who is actually, weirdly enough, older than me, which is bizarre at this point.
Like 29,
but,
right?
Yeah. And so it's, that's a weird college football thing. He was a college baseball player like Brandon Whedon, or a minor league baseball player like Brandon Whedon. So had all his eligibility and was like, why not go to the University of North Texas and try to turn this thing around? I think that they have some of those same pieces back from last year. Jair Shorter at receiver is a player that they really like a whole lot. I think that KD Davis at linebacker has an argument to be the best linebacker in the state of Texas. Like, they have some nice players there. I think that defensively, they didn't get enough credit for what they were able to do last year. I think that they really kind of figured something out there. And the question is whether the offense can come back around like it has in recent years. I think that I'm gonna have them in the bowl bound category. They made a bowl last year. I think that they made improvements versus last year. Again, though, it's kind of like the opposite of the Texas Tech one, where it's like their record is going to be bowl bound, but like they're kind of going to be a forgettable team in Texas. But I do think that they're probably going to get back to 6-6.
So I was also hoping that Grant Gunnell was going to win that job too. I didn't think he was, he hadn't played in a year and a half since he messed up his shoulder at Arizona. Texas guy, but I think they did announce it's Austin like 4 days ago or something like that. So UNT is tough. I mean, they have to go to UTSA, to Western Kentucky, and to UAB. I think those are the three favorites in that conference. So that's for that reason I had them barely missing one. But if they sneak one of those wins out, which they very well could, they're bowl bound. I see them right there, 6-6, 5-7, something like that.
I'm going to give UNT a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I feel like they've just been one of those teams that I think most people would assume that they're forgetful, but the coach, Seth Luttrell, I think he's going into his 6th season at UNT. He's 31 all time at UNT. I would say, I think they would just be around that 6-6 season, to be honest with you. I think that sounds about right. I would personally put them in bowl bound, but like you said, they have to go to UAB, to UTSA, and did you say that they have to go to UTEP also, or what was the third one?
They do have to go to UTEP and Western Kentucky.
Too, by the way. So actually, if I can jump in here, I think that actually we should jump forward to that next team, because I think between North Texas and UTEP, one is bowl bound, one is barely missed, because I think that game in week 0 might be the decisive game to decide which one of these two teams goes to.
So how about this? Let's keep it easy then. I mean, let's just do our game predictions for that one game, and whoever wins that majority will put them in bowl bound.
Yeah, let's go
Fair
for
enough.
it. I will say on UTEP, so first of all, some bad news. Apparently, Breon Hayward, their leading tackler from last year, is dealing with eligibility issues, according to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. So that doesn't help. But I'll tell you what, I did see some of their depth chart, and they have some defensive backs who have been there since like my first year at Dave Campbell's back in 2018, which is wild still to me. So their experience is a point on that back end. Their defensive line is really, really good. Like they are a really good Conference USA defensive line. Offensive line, I think they figured some things out. The big question for me, though, is what are they going to do at receiver without Jacob Cowing? So much of their offense was being explosive in the passing game and yards after the catch and him making plays. And now he's at Arizona. And so do they have a guy who can be a difference maker for them in the passing game? Now, the thing that helps them out is that this is going to be at the Sun Bowl. It's in El Paso. By the way, they also expect to sell out the stadium for the first time in like 15 years, 45,000 people at the Sun Bowl. So that'll be an exciting game. Make sure and watch that game in week 0. But I don't know if they have quite enough to get over the edge against North Texas. I think that it's a very important game for both these teams, but I think that North Texas is just a little more explosive. And I don't know without Jacob Cowing if there's that guy there who's going to be able to kind of step up in that kind of way at receiver and be explosive, because so much of UTEP's offense was just explosive plays last year. Without it, I don't know if I feel quite as good about them. So I probably lean North Texas.
I'm also leaning North Texas. We this was actually one of the games that we picked for our pod yesterday.
So are we in agreement that North Texas goes bowl bound and UTEP will slide into the barely missed bowling category?
I think that's fair.
That's fair.
All right.
I think that's where I lean.
Yeah, awesome. Adam, finish up what you were going to say.
I was going to say that we picked this was one of the games of the week that we picked for week 0 in our pod, and I picked North Texas.
Gotcha. All right. Well, next, before we move on to the two schools that will probably cause the most controversy, we have the University of Texas at San Antonio Roadrunners, Meep. I was really high on them last year. I mean, watching the run that they had, the city rallying around them, being able to have the sort of success that they had in Conference USA that we don't really see from the Roadrunners. I mean, they came up to the FBS, I believe, at the same time that Texas State did, and you see the wild differences between those two programs now. And UTSA, you know, they've obviously made better use of their resources as far as investing into their athletic programs. And that's a coaching staff that's, you know, really exciting. And I think we can't expect the season that they had last year to repeat again. For that reason, I'm personally going to be putting them in the conference champ hopeful category. I think that that's more than fair for where they're at, but I'm not gonna, you know, I don't think that they could really make a New Year's Six game just because of the position that they're in. So if anybody wants to jump in.
I got to give a huge shout to Jeff Traylor. He's done an absolute tremendous job with UTSA. I think he's done a much better job than what most people expected when he took over at UTSA. A good thing about one of my favorite things about UTSA is obviously, you know, if you're from San Antonio, if you've been to San Antonio, you always knew that that was a city that always rallied around the Spurs. Tides have changed a little bit. You know, I was at the UTSA Rice game at the Alamo Dome last year, and I was shocked by how well attended that game was. I remember one of our contributors, Brian, he told me that when he first started going to a few of UTSA's games, the lower bowl of the Alamo Dome was only like half full. Now it's like almost the entire lower bowl's filled up. It's actually a really hot stadium. I remember Rashad Wisdom made some really big plays. I think he got a pick six in that game, and the whole Alamo Dome just erupted. You know, while I do wish that they played in a better stadium, you know, I think a lot of people do. I think UTSA, I just think they finally built the foundation last year. I think last year, while they're obviously not going to go 11-1 the regular season every season, they've built a really good foundation for the future. I think they are conference championship hopeful. I do think for me, they are going to win the conference this year. I just think they do edge out UAB just a little bit talent wise. But, you know, they're conference championship hopeful for me. Jeff Traylor's done a tremendous job. And I'm really looking forward to their week one game that happens to be against, you know, UH that we literally just talked about. So can't wait to be at that game in a couple weeks.
No, and they play both Houston and Texas in the first couple weeks of the season, which I think should be an interesting challenge. I know that I'm sure Adam's going to be excited to try to get 2 wins over Jeff Traylor and his boys. But I think that when you get into conference play, I mean, this is a team that last year was built different, right? Like they were physical, they were big, they developed at a high level. You know, there was so much talk, obviously, of Sincere McCormick at running back, but they had lots of guys, right? Like they had a lot of guys at receiver. Joshua Cephas is back. Zachary Franklin at receiver is he's one of the best receivers in Conference USA, especially now with Jacob Cowan gone. I mean, he's just a freak, but defensively is, I think, where they're going to continue to even keep growing, because they had a great defensive linebacker here, bring a couple of those guys back. Trevor Harmonson at linebacker is a player who I don't think gets enough love in Conference USA circles. Obviously, Rashad Wisdom is the leader of that defense. He is the clear sort of defensive star in Conference USA in so many ways, as a lot of people thought that he would be when he decided to go there out of Converse Judson. And the funny thing about it is, when you talk about UTSA, when you talk about Jeff Traylor, the first thing people always tell you is, well, he's going to recruit the hell out of that state because of his ties with Texas high school. And he has. They had the #1 recruiting class in Conference USA last year. But the guys we won the conference with and went 11-1 with were not his players. They were not guys who he recruited. They were guys who were already there. And Frank Wilson before him did a good job of recruiting, but nothing like what Jeff Traylor's done. I think that we have to feel good enough about what they've got to know that they're going to develop what they're bringing in. And some of those guys from those first 2 recruiting classes are going to start paying off. And also to know that they're going to put guys in good positions that are going to eventually give them chances to win. You know, they've got a tough schedule, especially early on, but if they're able to survive some of that, I absolutely think that not only are they conference championship hopefuls, I think that they're going to be the favorite in Conference USA.
I agree. I said everything. Meet.
All right, so we're going to put UTSA into the conference championship hopeful, and we're going to save the best for last, but now, or maybe
we already did Baylor.
Anyway, next we're going to move on to the school I currently attend, Texas A&M. The Aggies. I'm going to start out by saying there is a lot of hype around here at College Station. I think rightfully so. You don't have to go very far on Twitter to find the hype either. this is probably I do think that we need to temper our expectations a little bit, especially for all Aggies out there, ones that are listening. Temper your expectations a little bit for 2022. I do think that this is going to be a bit more of a bridge year, moving into 2023. Obviously, the quarterback situation, we still haven't announced a starting quarterback unless that is broken while we are recording this. I've been seeing recently that it seems that Haynes King has the momentum in camp to start week 1, which he does bring the athleticism that I don't think that Max Johnson necessarily has, although we did see flashes of it in the spring game. And obviously the A&M offense, I'm just going to say this, it's the strongest since Johnny Manziel was at quarterback. The receiver room is deep. It's very young, but it is deep. You have obviously Anais Smith coming back this year, and thankfully, the matters that occurred a few weeks ago are not going to affect his eligibility for starting the season. Evan Stewart is a guy that I don't think gets hyped up enough for a guy who is a 5-star freak athlete, is able to make acrobatic catches. And then Noah Thomas might be the most underrated guy who can catch the football on A&M's roster. Love the tape that I've seen out of him in camp. And then A&M obviously is known for using its tight ends, as we've seen, Jalen Wademeyer being a guy who was heavily used throughout the past few years for A&M. Jake Johnson, brother of Max Johnson, Donovan Green, and then I forget the name of the Swede who we brought in. And I don't even want to try and pronounce his last name out of fear I would butcher it pretty badly. But, there is a lot of reason to be excited about A&M this year. I do think that for the sake of, I'm not going to say that we're a CFB contender or New Year's Six hopeful. I do think that we do finish second in the SEC West just because of all the talent that we do have in the defense. I don't think it's a rebuild. It's more of a reload. Defensive line, obviously we brought in the class that we did. So our defensive line is going to be very young with guys like Dindy, coming in, Walter Nolan especially, who is just absolutely humongous, has obliterated our offensive line in drills. But I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited, especially with guys like Antonio Johnson returning, Damani Richardson, who is the cornerstone of A&M's secondary, who decided to return for his senior season. But I'm going to go with A&M in the conference champ hopeful category. Because I do think that, if everything goes right, A&M could end up right back where they were last year, but obviously, hopefully with a more stable quarterback situation. So whoever wants to jump in next, I know I just said a lot in a short amount of time, so whoever wants to take over next, feel free.
Slow your roll. I mean, like, I know you said what you said about like tempering expectations. Hey, we know A&M, they always got talented. They always got a talented roster almost every year. The issue that A&M has is the division that they play in, and that's honestly not a secret to anyone. Let's be honest. The fairy tale. I was there. The fairy tale game against Alabama last year. It's not going to be back this year. I think Alabama's going to be out for revenge. Also, there's going to be a stretch of over a month where there's not going to be a game played at Kyle Field. You still, you got to open up the season against Sam Houston and App State. Okay, fine, those two. Then you welcome in Miami. I think they have a reason to be excited. Tyler Van Dyke closed out last season so strong. I do think Miami this year is a different Miami that we've known of seasons past. I think A&M will still win that game closely, but I would not rule out the Canes in that game by any stretch. Then that 24th game, you got to go to Arlington to play Arkansas. Then you have to play this road schedule: Mississippi State and Starkville, Alabama, Tuscaloosa, bye week. Hang on, which one's a dub?
Mississippi State.
Are you sure? Will Rogers, man, like Will Rogers,
the defense that we brought in this year, I genuinely don't think that Will Rogers is going to be able, especially with all the talent that we have on the defensive line, unless the Mississippi State's offensive line has gained that much talent. And last year, I would pin a lot of that loss on Zach Calzada. A&M was not able to advance the football a lot all game. And Zach Calzada showed many reasons why he wasn't the guy. But I think that this year we have a much better chance of beating Mississippi State.
I just think Will Rogers himself, I mean, he's won a lot of games for Mississippi State last season. That's why I still have a lot of faith in him. Obviously he doesn't have Polk there anymore, a wide receiver, but it's in Starkville, still Cowbell. That's still going to be a 7:30 game probably. I would still give it to Mississippi State just on the edge. You still got to go to Tuscaloosa. I don't know how good South Carolina is going to be this year with Spencer Rattler going over there to South Carolina, but I don't think that should be a game that should just be thrown out as an easy win. Then you do got to play Ole Miss at Kyle. I would say bowl bound, but a very, very high end bowl bound. I just don't think overcoming Bama is enough in my honest opinion. It's really asking a really tall task. This is what you were saying earlier about a bridge year for A&M. 2022 A&M just for me is just not going to be that it. I still think you're going to get that 9-3 season that you're so much very used to. I'm not trying to throw shade when I say it, but it's truth. But at the same time, I think once we get to 2024, I think that's when things are really, really going to change. So not this year, but next year and year after for me is when A&M will be, I would say, probably 2 tiers up.
So here's what I'll say. Okay. So first of all, I heard this stat on the radio. I think there have only been 12 teams to finish their previous season unranked to then start top 10 in the preseason AP poll. And Texas A&M is one of those teams, finishing last year unranked and starting this year at number 6. The other thing that I'll mention is that out of the guys that you mentioned, a lot of them have never played college football before, right? I think that Evan Stewart is somebody who we can expect, and have expectations for. I don't know how much I feel that way about the rest of the receiver room. We've heard these great players come through A&M before, and I think that one of the reasons, and again, I think Stewart's going to be a great player right away, but Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, the system that obviously he runs has been notoriously unfriendly to young receivers. We waited for Damon Demas to come through, for Moose Muhammad to come through, for Miles Price to come through, right? These are not guys Jalen Preston to come through. We haven't seen these guys deliver in a meaningful way. I'd argue that Texas A&M maybe hasn't had a single year where they have where the receiver room is a plus, despite the way that they've recruited the entire time Jimbo Fisher's been at Texas A&M. And by the way, like you mentioned, now you lose Jalen Weidermeyer to the NFL, and right now the number 1 tight end is a converted defensive end in Max Wright. So I like what they have on offense. I don't love it. And then defensively, a lot of pieces to be excited about. A lot of guys that by the time that we're heading into the November, I think are going to be awesome players on the defensive line. But you mentioned it early on. I mean, these are going to be a lot of freshmen and redshirt freshmen and sophomores playing. And so I don't think it's fair to expect the defensive line to be as good as it was last year, where you have DeMarvin Leal and Michael Clemens, guys who are obviously starring in training camp right now. So the question is for me, I think they're going to be a little bit better on the back end. Antonio Johnson is a name that everybody needs to know. He played nickel for them last year. The front 7, I think, is going to be very good. I don't know if it's going to be as good as it was last year. I think that DJ Durkin's a pretty severe downgrade at defensive coordinator, though they'll still be fine at that. There are a lot of pieces that I like, and I don't know how they're going to go together. That's my big question mark with A&M right now. And so, when you start talking, and again, they're a victim of their own expectations because they finished number 1 in the recruiting rankings and start number 6 in the country. If they start number 15 in the country, I think we'll see the season as a success. But I will say, I think that this is the year where they don't have to compete with Alabama, but this has to be the year where they show that they're different from everybody else, because the rest of the SEC West, maybe Arkansas will be good, but they're not special, right? They're not Alabama. And so for me, I'm looking at this, Alabama and Georgia are going to be head and shoulders above everybody else. A&M has to be that second team after those two, right? They have to be. If they're not 9 or 10, I think we have to say something's wrong there. I think we have to say that this isn't going to happen here. We're starting to get to that level where it's you got to show me something, man. You can't have your best season be the pandemic year and lose 4 games every other year. You just can't. And so,
I mean, absolutely. And a guy that hasn't even come up yet, Devon Achane, who, I mean, he is one of the most talented running backs in the entire country, might be the fastest guy in all of college football.
Yeah.
Ran track for us this past spring. He is an incredible athlete and a guy that, especially with our offensive line that was really, really young last year.
Yeah. And I think they'll be a plus this year, to be clear. I think that Bryce Foster, Ruben Fothery, they really came on as the season went along.
Yeah. And so, you do have a couple questions, especially I believe at right guard. There are a few guys who could swap in and out, so I'm not sure how that's going to look on the depth chart against Sam Houston. But like you said, there are a lot of pieces that have to go together. Not sure how it's going to be. I hate to say it, but we are either going to be, I think realistic ceiling for A&M this year is going to be 10-2. I wouldn't be surprised to see us go 8-4, but I will say if we do go 8-4, but you see these pieces upgrading as the season does go on, and you can really look forward to 2023. But there are a lot of question marks right now. So, Adam, do you have any rebuttal or anything like that to what we've talked about so far?
And don't you worry, I'm going to bring this energy at Adam too.
Whoa. Different circumstances. No, but I do kind of agree with what was said. I just think Texas A&M is they're too young right now. To put them at conference champ hopefuls, I think is a little bit too much. What were they, 4-4 last year in the SEC?
Yes.
That's not good. I think what was that, like fourth or fifth in the
fifth in the West,
fifth in the West. That can't happen. You have to go 5-3, 6-2. Can they do that? Yes, but I wouldn't feel confident picking them to go 6-2 in these games. I think it's a lot of pick 'em games, a lot of toss-ups, and those can go either way. Can they win them? Yes. I think they have an opportunity to win every single game on their schedule other than Alabama. They have a good chance in winning them.
I'll agree with that.
But when you have a young team, you're gonna slip up.
Yeah.
Here's my genuine question. Before we can just put them on the conversation of hopeful, if that's what we're going.
It's not where I was going.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was, if you're going to put them at conference championship hopeful, then you absolutely have to be hopeful that they'll beat Alabama. That's just the logic that I personally view from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I'm only saying that because I think that. Do I think that the Alabama game is going to be some absolutely epic blowout? No, I do think that we play them within 2 touchdowns. And against Alabama, that is a close game. It is going to be a tall task in Tuscaloosa. It's a very hostile environment, especially when we come in, because they don't like us. We don't like them. But I do think that this team all around is in a lot of ways more talented, especially at the position that makes the most difference at quarterback than we were at last year. So I don't know that you can really set that expectation yet.
And I do want to bring up quarterback for a second, because, you mentioned, I remember hearing some reports out of camp at Auburn that Zach Calzada is competing for the starting job. And it was like, oh, so they're really going to suck this year. They're really going to just not play football well this year, because he was not good last year. He did not do anything well outside of one game where he had a fever dream and beat Alabama. He is the worst quarterback to ever beat Nick Saban post 2007 when they lost to ULM. And it's not even that close, right? So the one thing that I will say though is that I don't love what I saw from Haynes King in that first game either, right? He threw 3 interceptions against Kent State last year. Now, that's one game, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that obviously he doesn't.
That means we're on the Connor Whiteman train now.
Yeah, well, and so, so for me, I was waiting for Max Johnson to kind of be that guy, because he has had success in the SEC, because he's been accurate, because I think he's made smart plays, even if he doesn't have the physical upside. But, some of what this Haynes King thing says to me is, man, Haynes knows the system. And if you don't know the system the way that you need to know the system, it's not even a starting point, right? That's been the criticism for Jimbo for a long time, is that, man, you have this talent, and if it's not ready to go, then is it going to get there? And
right. And and to your point, that's why I'm a little bit concerned about what's going on at the quarterback position, but that does make me optimistic about Connor Wigman's future, because he is going to have, I wouldn't be shocked if they redshirted him. It would not shock me at all.
Oh, they should. Yeah.
They should redshirt him. And I think that Eli Stowers, who last year converted to tight end, but this year has gone back to the quarterback position, he should be number 3 on the depth chart. Get a year for Wigman to really understand the scheme, the offense, learn all the little nuances that Jimbo does teach, because there are little weird quirks all over the offense. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Shehan. What were you gonna say?
No, I mean, and so that's the thing, right? So I'm curious, what exactly is the upside with Haynes King? What is the upside if you throw in Max Johnson, who doesn't know the system as well, but is probably a better quarterback at this point than Haynes King is? That's my question. It's going to be an improvement, no question about it, on Zach Calzada. I will never forget the last play for Texas A&M in that Mississippi State game last year where they had the safety. That was the wildest finish to an SEC game I've ever seen in my life. Zach Calzada just loses track of where he's going and then gets sacked in the end zone for a safety, takes it from a 2-point game to a 4-point game. Mississippi State gets the ball back. Like, that was historic type stuff of what the hell is going on. And then that guy beat Alabama, which is wild.
I will say that is the most defeated I've ever felt in my life leaving Kyle Field.
Totally.
I mean, him falling backwards like that into our own end zone for a safety is something that I don't know what the play call was there, because it didn't even look like he knew what it was. Everything was out of sync, but whatever.
Yeah.
I moved on from that.
Yeah.
That era.
Totally. And so I think that for me, that's just going to be the big question mark is, they're going to be worse at certain spots in the front seven just because they're going to be so much younger. And, I like Achane a lot. I mean, Isaiah Spiller was a workhorse back for this team, right? So I think that you want to hope probably that they're about the same. Now I think that in Achane, they have more explosive upside. But the question is, again, in this offense, is that going to show itself? I hope it does. I hope that it does. I hope that they kind of move him out and throw the ball to him a little bit too, right? Like the Achane wheel route sounds like a lot of fun if it happens. But
yeah, I mean, you saw that against Alabama. That was
Right.
one of the biggest plays in the entire game was the wheel route
Right.
perfectly placed
Totally.
over his shoulder, which we had never seen a more accurate throw all year from Zach Calzada than that one right there. So I don't know where that came from, but you know what? I'll agree with y'all, and I'll put A&M into the bowl bound category just because there is so many question marks.
Yeah. They got to win 10 this year, man. They got to prove that they're just better than everybody else. They don't have to beat Bama, but they got to. You're given one, right? You get a mulligan somewhere. You lose to Ole Miss or Auburn or Mississippi State or whatever. You can lose one of those, but you got to win the rest.
You think they have to win 10 games? I feel like
they
that's a
have
lot.
to.
I think
have
9
to with
for
that
me.
young of a team?
I would point to back in 2016, Kirby Smart takes over at Georgia, right? That first year is a little bit of a mess. They go 7-6. It's kind of like, they show some things. They kind of don't know what they want to do. That second year, they're playing in the national title game. And after that, every year, they've won at least 10 games. And in so many ways, Texas A&M's getting the Georgia treatment in terms of they recruited that number one level. And so you just kind of assume it's coming, but it's never come, right? Like, I mean, they had that 2020 year. That was real nice. And other than that, it's been 4 losses every year. Like, it's been 4 losses every year. I think they have to win 10. Even if it's a 10-3, I'll accept it. I'll give them partial credit on it if they win their bowl game. But like, they have to get to 10. They've won 10 games one time since 1998. They have to win 10 this year.
And you know what? I will take 9 any day. 9 is my target. I just want to get away from the Texas 8-4 jokes. Move on to 2023. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
But next, this is one that probably the most anticipated. We saved it for last. The University of Texas Longhorns. Adam, I'll let you go start this one.
So I just want y'all to hear me out. Okay.
Headphones coming off.
Hear me out. Look, I'm gonna plead my case on why we're conference champ hopefuls.
Oh, okay. I'm out of here. Catch you guys.
Let me plead my case. Let me finish. Okay. Other than Baylor, lost a lot of their skill position players. Oklahoma State did as well. Oklahoma, we know what happened with them and their, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams. I do love Dylan Gabriel. I think he might be the best quarterback in the conference. The Texas Longhorns have so many pieces returning. Granted, they were ass last year. But Bijan Robinson's returning, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington. On defense, Luke Brockermeyer is there over Sean Jameson. He can't tackle, but he's coming back. Cook. They just have so many pieces returning, and I don't think the Big 12 is as top heavy as it was when Oklahoma had Lincoln Riley and they were just rolling. I think Baylor is a favorite. I don't really think it's close. But after that, I think it's a toss-up. And because Texas has so many pieces returning, I think they got a shot.
So the first player that you mentioned among defenders is a walk-on. And I kind of feel like that describes a lot about where Texas is right now, that they've recruited at a top 5 level for like 5 years. And they're starting walk-ons at linebacker because they don't have guys. And so I'm a big Quinn Ewers fan. I think that he's a stud. I got to watch him in that state championship game against Cade Klubnik back in 2020. And I mean, that man, the physicals on that man are insane, right? Like he can make every throw. He can throw on the run. He can throw off platform. It's ridiculous. They lost their best offensive lineman. They lost their most explosive receiver, who was going to be the number 2 guy to complement Xavier Worthy. They're probably going to be starting 3 true freshmen against Alabama. And if I remember right, the last time I remember a true freshman starting against Alabama, it kind of didn't go very well and kind of ruined him. So I hope that doesn't happen. And then defensively, I mean, they were a mess, and I don't see why they're not going to continue to be a mess. So, they don't have any key guys coming in in terms of transfers at linebacker or defensive line. They do bring in actually a transfer from James Madison, who was an FCS All-American, who I think is actually very good at inside linebacker, but like there's a lot of question marks. And you mentioned it. I do think that even including Baylor, I don't think that Baylor's an overwhelming favorite. I think that there are 5 teams who have a chance to make the Big 12 title game. But the flip side of that is I think that there are 5 teams who could also like completely fall apart, right? Like could completely collapse. I'm not saying 5 and 7 again, obviously, but like they're going to play Alabama in week 2. They're going to have to follow up that week 2 game by playing a team that they're going to beat, but a UTSA team that's going to give them hell. And then they go into conference play. They've got to play Kansas State. They got to play Baylor. They got to play Oklahoma. They got to play Oklahoma State. I think all those games are losable. I think that Texas and Texas Tech are both losable games. I think that Kansas is actually going to be a better team this year. And like, there's a lot there where it could go off the rails for Texas if they can't grab a hold of things early in the season. I'm putting them in bowl bound, but and they will make a bowl. They're not going to miss a bowl again. But there is a lot of chaos to be had there, and I mean, I think that for me, there are 5 teams that have the potential to win the Big 12, and I think Texas 5th among them. And I felt a lot better about them moving higher in that group before they lost their most important lineman. Like I feel a lot worse about that, knowing that their offensive line is not just going to be bad again, but it's probably going to be worse than it was last year.
It's going to be a lot of, I think the scrimmage, they had 4 freshmen on the offensive line starting.
That's not good.
It's not great.
Not good. And the one that they have back is the 2 players that they have back on the offensive line are a pretty good center who really isn't going to be able to help very much on the edges, and their worst tackle, Christian Jones, is not good. And so like, what are we doing? How are we going to stop anybody? And by the way, I'll mention too, Baylor and Oklahoma State, and actually Kansas State, probably the 3 teams that maybe are the favorites right now, all defensive line heavy teams, right? You're going to have Felix Anudike-Uzomah at Kansas State. You're going to have Colin Oliver at Oklahoma State. You're going to have Jackson Player and Siaki Ika at Baylor. Like, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, if I'm being perfectly honest.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and be as objective as possible. Everything that Shehan just said is right. I mean, quite frankly, like, listen, look, we already know Worthy, Robinson, we've still yet to see Ewers in a live football game too. I love any team in the country would gladly take Xavier Worthy and Bijan Robinson. Rest of that offensive team, I don't think it's that easy. Let's just be honest. Y'all ever see that Family Guy meme where Stewie takes the ball and he's like, no one's blocking? That's going to be Quinn Ewers this season. And I've seen enough of Texas last season when I was at that Oklahoma State game that, I think we joked a lot about that Oklahoma game up at the combo, but that Oklahoma State game the very next week really personified that whole Texas season, where they just started off really well the first half. Then from that third going to that fourth quarter, it just started looking really demoralizing. And like, listen, sure, Quinn is probably going to be an upgrade over Casey. We just got to see it unfold. And I just don't think Sark's a really, really smart offensive guy, but it's just like there's just been so much going wrong second half in games in terms of game planning that defense is still a joke. I don't even know how it's even going to even be better. It's like what you're saying. Like they're going to return a lot of talent, but like if a company sucks because all of its employers suck,
but they were up double digit in those games that you mentioned though.
And those same players blew it.
Were they that far off?
I mean, they were shallowly soft.
Now you're sounding like a Nebraska fan at this point.
Of course, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to be that guy.
Are you saying that you're the greatest 5-7 team of all time?
Definitely the most expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, and also there's just a lot of really tight games here. I mean, the fact that you have to go to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State, and you have to, you may have the bye, but you got to play Kansas State literally the game right after. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be a hot take. Deuce Vaughn's going to have more yards than Bijan in that game. And that's not even nowhere near a diss on Bijan.
I think they can lose that game. I think they'll lose one of those two. They're
going to lose both those games, honestly.
They could lose both. They're definitely going to lose one of the two.
Lose both.
And like the Baylor game at the end of the season, Oklahoma, I mean, I still don't know 100% what to make of Oklahoma. I just think personally, there's just a lot of coin flip games right here for Texas. I just think if you were told that they were going to have an 8-4 record, I would just take it, to be honest with you. I mean, just take it as a 3-game improvement from last season. Be more than happy. You're still going to have Xavier Worthy and Quentin Ewers back next season at the absolute worst. Sure, Bijan might be gone, but they know how to reload on the running back. I just take it as a bridge year and just be happy.
What I'm saying is, I'm not saying Texas is going to run the table. I'm not.
We've been saying Texas back quite a bit.
We are back, but I'm not saying that we can lose to Alabama. That's fine. Like, okay, that doesn't affect the conference. I think that it's so much variety. Kansas State is really good. I don't think they're going to run the table. I don't think Oklahoma is going to run the table. Everybody's going to beat up on each other. That the second place team could be 6-3 and win the tiebreaker or something like that.
No, I mean, I think
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just don't think that Texas will have the tiebreaker in that case because they play at Oklahoma State and at Kansas State. And so, like, I think fair. So, I mean, I think that you look at, I mean, we can real quick just go through the conference schedule, right? At Texas Tech, I mean, that's a win, but, like, Texas Tech freaking hates Texas, right? Like, that would be their Super Bowl to be able to win that game. So that's not a fun game to start off. Versus West Virginia, I'm pretty down on West Virginia this year. It's at home. I think they'll win that game, but also that's probably a 65-35 game in favor of Texas. The Oklahoma game, obviously, I think that they're going to win that game. I think that they're going to have a chance to do that, but I also don't know exactly what to expect from Oklahoma this year.
I would say 3-0. We might be back.
Well, okay, fine. Let's jump into that. So I would say, let's say that's a win. Okay, that's 4-0 right there. Then you get at Oklahoma State. That's a loss to me. At Kansas State, that's a loss to me. We'll skip to the end of the year versus Baylor. That's a loss to me. And I think that TCU and at Kansas are probably wins, but they're
TCU
not
owns Texas.
Yeah, well, this is a new coaching staff. I'm curious to see what it is. But, like, neither of those are surefire wins. And again, I think Kansas has legitimately improved this year. This is not like a meme thing, right? Like, so it's like that's 3 pretty clear losses right there. If I'm saying they're beating Oklahoma and Texas Tech, which I don't think is a lock either, like, and that's where we start.
That's being objective.
Yeah. There's not a lot of margin for error for Texas this year. Me and Adam even talked about this in the Big 12 preview video. There's no conference with more coin flip games than the Big 12 this year. And picking out that midfield of the Big 12 is very difficult because I think at the top, your top 2 teams are going to be Baylor and Oklahoma. I think that you drop a tier below that when you start talking about Oklahoma State, Texas, and Kansas State, who can kind of make up those next 3. And I do think that Quinn Ewers is really good. Again, we haven't seen him take a single snap in college football. So whatever we see week 1, you don't have to take it, that's going to be how he's going to be the rest of the season, just because, he's probably going to have a lot of nerves getting out there for his first start. But I think that, as Shehan talked about earlier, your defense for Texas is so many new guys, and you don't have those big impact guys really returning. And that was your biggest Achilles heel last year, was that defense down the stretch in games, blowing leads and just not being able to finish games. And then your offense on top of that, Bijan probably will not have the year that he had last year. just because the offensive line is just not in the position that it is. And that's, again, not a diss on Bijan. It's just the state of the Texas offense, and that, you guys might have a lot of plays explode in your own backfield.
Yeah,
especially
I
when you go up against the Monstars of Alabama.
I think for me, I think Bijan's going to have that good a year. I think that Roschon Johnson's going to be great for them. I think the running game is going to be pretty good just based off talent. But like, okay, so Xavier Worthy is a sure thing. He's going to have 1,200 yards, no problem. I mean, I think that we all expected Isaiah Nair to be number 2. I think that Ajayi Hall was somebody who we expected to contribute. He's already getting himself suspended. Jaleel Billingsley at tight end was a player who we expected to be a big part of the rotation. He's getting himself, not involved. I don't know, it just keeps happening, right? Where all these guys who we think maybe are going to have a chance to contribute for Texas just keep falling out. And they have, a lot of nice pieces at wide receiver. They've got some young guys. I think Brennan Thompson is probably going to play right away from Spearman, the number 1 wide receiver commit that Texas got this year. But like, we're kind of having to go young real quick.
Getting Jordan Whittington back isn't going to help?
I mean, how long is he back? That's always been the question with Jordan Whittington. And so, and he's a good player, but again, he's kind of like a possession receiver, right? Like he's not somebody who's gonna cause some explosive mismatches down the field. So like everything, because heading into this year, I mean, if you told me like to ask back in, March or April, I think I feel a lot better about this team being a contender for the Big 12. And it feels like literally every single thing has gone the wrong way of how it needed to go for things to be back to the way that you feel like it's going to be. And by the way, they were just like, no, we can just improve internally at linebacker and defensive line and defensive back. And it's like, I guess you can try that. I don't know if that's the strategy that I'd use, but good luck to them. But I have them bowl bound. I do think that, I think that there is actually going to be a second group under Baylor. And I don't think that it's definitely going to be Oklahoma. I think that Kansas State and Oklahoma State absolutely have a chance too. And Texas can get into that group, but I would have written them into that group before all this kind of happened. And now I don't feel as good about them.
All right. Yeah. So, I think we're in agreement that Texas belongs in bowl bound right alongside A&M. Who would have thought?
Can we move them first?
No, SMU is the most likely of that group to go up and win a title, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
How do we feel about this? I feel like, I feel really bad for kind of Rice and Texas State right there, because we probably should have just put them on the forgetful the whole time. We probably didn't need that extra tier, but let's just be honest, those teams are so forgetful that you forget that you forgot about them.
No, they're in a league of their own.
All right, so Shehan, how about this? Baylor versus UH in the Cotton Bowl. Drinks on me that day.
Don't you mean in the college football playoff, man? I mean, come on, you gotta set the bar high.
I mean, our schedule just ain't gonna let it happen. But y'all, I know we ran on for so long, but man, this was a lot of fun. I loved all the banter. I loved all the insults. I loved the roast of Adam Coleman. That was all great. Guys, you made it this far along. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know your picks. Where did we get it wrong? Where did we get it right? Feel free to cook us, to be honest with you. I mean, if you're a Rice or a Texas State fan, tell us why you guys should be bowl bound. Y'all don't exist. But anyways, guys, thanks again.
I will throw out one quick plug. So actually this week I do a podcast called the College Football Survivor Show. It's a playoff focused show. And basically we basically vote teams in and out of contention. And so this is our preseason group right now. We're voting teams into contention. Texas A&M did make our contenders group. They dragged me with kicking and screaming into that. But this week we do actually have Houston up for debate, whether they deserve to be in the playoff mix as well. Baylor also, by the way, in the field as well. So Houston's going to be the discussion this week. It's going to come out on Wednesday. Follow us on Twitter at CFB Survivor Show, and make sure and subscribe to the show as well.
Choose wisely, because I'll definitely be tuning in.
I'll be in the comments.
You heard what I said, man.
I know what you said. I know what you said.
I will mention.
So I got your back.
I will mention last year, because we maxed out at 12. 12 is the most that we're allowed to have on our contender group, right? Like that's how we do it. Last year, I made the case and I got it in. We got Cincinnati on our preseason board. So we had it first. We did see that there was a path. So if we feel like there's going to be a path, we're going to talk about there having a path. So, I obviously when you hear playoff show, you're probably like, oh, they're just going to talk about Alabama the whole time. That's not what we do there. We really are getting into the fringes and all that sort of stuff too. So it's a lot of fun. And again, I'm excited for our chance to get some votes. And by the way, follow us on Twitter, and you can actually vote whenever we're voting teams in and out of the poll as well. And the viewers get a vote along with each of the two people on the podcast.
That explains how Texas A&M got in. Let the viewers vote.
Hey, Aggies never lose an internet poll.
Never.
Never. All right, guys. Once again, Shehan will be putting your Twitter handle on definitely on this video. So, guys, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you check out that Survivor show. Sounds a lot of fun, and y'all have a good one.